Thank you, Justice Song, for those inspirational words. That's a great start for our morning. Our next panel is entitled From Inspiration to Action, Strengthening the Rule of Law Through Effective Programs. If I could have our panel join us here on stage, please. While they're coming to the stage, let me say how important the work of the International Criminal Court is, and how I know many of the organizations represented here today have worked in support of the court. It's an important part of what the rule of law will be for the future. Another editorial comment here. For those who wish to explore the Rule of Law Index in greater detail, following up on the presentation yesterday, the index team will hold office hours today from 1 to 2:30 in the World Cafe on level 0, which I think is this level of the conference center. So if you'd like to follow up with the index team, questions about the index, how it's organized, how it's put together, I know they would enjoy talking with you. A primary goal of the World Justice Project is the incubation of rule of law projects, strengthening the rule of law. In this program that you will hear now, you will hear about several present and past programs implementing that were initiated about how the rule of law can be strengthened in different communities and different sectors, how they moved from inspiration to real action. Our moderator for this program is Sandra Elena, Director of Justice Programs for CIPPEC in Argentina. Sandra will introduce our panelists. Sandra, please.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. The purpose of this panel is to inspire this audience on behalf of the rule of law. We want to provide you some ideas for your own rule of law projects. We hope that after this session, you'll have an idea that can be transformed into a project. Our goal here today is to infuse you with some energy and some inspiration for an action plan that can be further developed in the incubators session and when you are back home too. This is exactly what happened to me at the World Justice Forum 1. After listening to all the wonderful presentations and feeling the energy and the commitment of the organizers and speakers, I decided to change a little bit the approach of my own projects and make them more multidisciplinary and focus on working directly with the people. And some of the panelists share my impression on this topic. This is how I became an Opportunity Fund grantee in the past, in the first round, implementing a wonderful project in my home country, Argentina, named Growing Up with the Rule of Law. The project was devoted to provide legal education to poor children in Buenos Aires province. And I always say the same. On top of improving the protection of children's rights in this poor neighborhood of the province, it saved me from working all the time with lawyers and judges and make me work more close to the people who are really should be the focus of our efforts. So there is a lot of potential to change. Working with people makes you understand how they can change the world, and the promotion of the rule of law should be focused on them. We want to tell you the stories behind amazing projects that were implemented with different types of assistance from the World Justice Project and its network of contributors and experts. In particular, the Opportunity Fund is an example of the World Justice Project commitment to action. It funded 68 projects since 2008. These projects were conducted in 44 countries and were aimed at strengthening the rule of law but creating new constituencies and coalitions among different disciplines, informing thousands about their rights and helping people gain access to justice. But the World Justice Project also provides several opportunities for collaboration. The contacts made at the regional and international meetings are examples of this. So this meeting is a way or an opportunity to test your ideas and to further develop them and to gain support for the implementation of the ideas that you already have. So my advice is talk to each other, learn from each other, take the opportunity that this meeting gives you. So you will be able to better develop your ideas and create sound projects that can be supported by the World Justice Project. So now I will briefly introduce you these panelists who are implementers of projects in different countries. All their projects are in some way connected to the World Justice Project, either as Opportunity Funds grantees or because they were originated according to ideas incubated at the forum. Let me stop here and introduce the panelists. Briefly introduce the panelists, then I will ask you to introduce yourself and your projects and your ideas. So, Marnie Gustavson, she is a founder and president of Creative Economic Opportunities, and she has been working for many years on programs focused on women in Afghanistan. Then we have Zanaa Jurmed. She is the director of the Citizens Alliance Fund. She is a gender activist and is currently devoted to protect public goods in Mongolia. Matthew Bugher. He is the Myanmar project manager for Justice Base, a UK rule of law NGO. He is one of the recipients of an Opportunity Fund grant in the last round, the third round in 2012. Then we have Nemata Majeks-Walker. She is a human rights and gender activist in Sierra Leone, and she is the founder of the 50/50 group of Sierra Leone. Then we have Ruha Devanesan. She is the executive director of PeaceTones, a wonderful initiative that works with musicians in different countries. So I will ask Marnie to tell something about yourself and tell something briefly about the project you are implementing in Afghanistan.
Okay. First, I have to correct you. I'm the executive director of an NGO called Parsa.
Yeah.
It's an 18-year-old NGO. Actually was started in the war and founded by an American woman. Also, I have to acknowledge my colleague and national director, Yassine Farid, who is here, and he and I really are the strategic minds behind our programs at Parsa. We work with women, we work with orphans. We're pretty much a frontline organization. The project that emerged out of my participation at the second forum was a project that we call Scouts, Afghan Scouts and the Rule of Law. And it is a project where we combined we are the agency responsible in Afghanistan right now for rehabilitating an 80-year-old program called the Afghan Scouts Program. And as a function really of the thinking that I did in the forum 4 years ago, we connected with a community policing program in Afghanistan, which is training police to start to work with the communities, with our program with the Afghan Scouts. And we did a merit badge called the Rule of Law. And this year we're expanding the program, and this year our theme is Peace Through Rule of Law.
So can you elaborate a little bit on how the collaboration with people at the World Justice Forum helped you develop your idea?
Well, I'm a frontline worker, which means that I'm pretty narrowly focused on just working with our beneficiaries to make sure that they have food and they have health care and they have education. And in an environment like Afghanistan, it really is very, very difficult to be a frontline worker. The opportunity that happened at the forum that really changed the way that I started to work is that I always thought rule of law was the jurisdiction of lawyers, or that they're the professionals in law. I always thought that was something that was not really my responsibility. If I wanted to do some work like that, I would go hire a legal aid or go hire a lawyer as part of my programs. What emerged for me in the forum that I so loved was the notion that, in fact, rule of law is my responsibility also, and I, in fact, can, particularly by the definition that the World Justice Forum gives to rule of law, that I can and could and should make that part of our programs. How that translates into our programs is we have a strategic approach of working with communities where we hold communities responsible for their own rehabilitation. So rather than taking in money and trying to caretake the communities, Yassine and his team go in and ask the communities how they are going to be responsible for the rehabilitation of their community, how they're going to grow their community. How that transferred when we started to add rule of law, as Yassine and his team began to ask and say, what is the responsibility of your public officials? What's the responsibility of your government to you? We would say to our beneficiaries. So it has become a part of our program, has become working with our beneficiaries to hold their public officials to account for their job in the community. Now, sometimes in Afghanistan that's confusing. In our community policing program, the community police, for the most part, are illiterate and didn't know what their jobs were, even. But what we did is we set up a scenario where the police came in and conducted weekly meetings with our Afghan scouts. We gave them topics, and when they started working with our scouts on community service, visiting the hospitals, cleaning up the area, and what happened to our police is they actually began to learn what their role was in the community by interacting with the children in our programs.
Okay.
Is that a breath or more questions?
So, which were the main challenges you encountered when implementing this project?
Well, a main challenge was the police not having any idea or understanding about their relationship with the community, or they're actually called police mardami, they're called community policing, but it was really artificially put together by the international community, where they went to the police and said, you should have a community policing program. So the big challenge is, it took us almost 6 months to get the permissions and to get the police to agree to work with the children. Once they did, however, the following 6 months, what began to happen is spontaneous events where the police would include the children in local ceremonies. We started to do distributions to the poor people through the children, and the police took over that and really made sure that that worked. So once they actually began to interact with the youth in the Afghan Scouts programs, they really bought off on it and took it on. But the original, trying to get everybody to understand this was a good thing, was my biggest challenge, our biggest challenge.
Did you partner with other national or international organizations for this project?
We worked with the there's international agencies training the police right now. It's one of the biggest activities in Afghanistan, and we worked pretty closely with those agencies all over the country.
So through the life of your project that is still going on, can you describe the contacts that you have in either capacity or what in any way with the World Justice Project?
I'm sorry, I'm not clear about the question.
Have you tell someone at the World Justice Project of the progress you were making in your
I
own
regularly
project?
update the World Justice Forum on the progress because I really consider the thinking that I do in the forums. I think one of the most revolutionary notions for me as a frontline NGO worker is that the multidisciplinary approach to teaching rule of law. And really people like me are your pragmatists. We're the ones that actually have to go do programs with people or we don't get paid. So we're good at coming up with mechanisms. So a couple of other mechanisms that are on our table are to combine social workers with legal aids. We're working in the women's shelters, which is very, very controversial in Afghanistan. It's where the women who are, under threat of being killed by their families go into these shelters. And a combination of the social workers with the legal aids is something that's not being done in Afghanistan. And that's a multidisciplinary approach that we hope that we're going to be able to do to work with the women. And another thing that we're really working on is the voice of the people being able to hold their government officials to account, because as you can imagine in Afghanistan it's pretty dangerous to speak up. But we have found, in particular Yasin and his team started children's committees, and we work in the national orphanages, which are pretty difficult places, and Yasin worked with the National Orphanage Director, Mr. Hashemi, and with the children in the national orphanages to form committees, and Mr. Hashemi has given the committees his personal mobile phone number and requested that they report to him if there's things that are not going well. And we currently have one of our orphanages, the children called in about sexual abuse, and it's now gotten into Kabul, and it's now been reported by the press and is being addressed at the Kabul level. So it's a multidisciplinary approach, and it's really people like me who originally did not consider rule of law my job, taking it on at the grassroots level.
Okay. Do you have any monitoring and evaluation mechanism for your project?
Always, many.
Can you describe a
Well,
little
and
bit?
we're highly monitored by the government. All of our projects have, because we're have donors that we need to account to. We, as an organization, we work pretty much on a case management study, so we have very, very detailed reports on each of the children, each of the troops, in terms of the progress according to our goals.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else you can add in the first round of presentations?
I can tell some stories, but I don't want to monopolize until you've introduced everybody else.
No. So why don't you tell a nice story about your project?
So one of the funny stories is we do community service projects. And in Afghanistan, we don't have a lot of options in terms of activities because it's pretty dangerous in the communities. And so, but we have, for our scouts, we have a big activity called cleaning up the garbage in the community. And we have many different ways to make that entertaining. But in Bamyan, in our office in Bamyan in central Afghanistan, some of our troops, we have an office right next to one of the biggest hotels in the region, and it's coincidentally owned by Seema Samar. She is a civil rights activist who is a nominee for the Nobel Prize, quite really well known in our country. So the children would go out every week, pick up the garbage, and the staff from the hotel would throw the garbage back out every week. And as Yasin describes it, they were quite excited to have the children pick up. In fact, they thought it was the children's jobs to pick up the garbage every week. And so the children complained to Yasin, and Yasin said, well, and what are your rights and what are you going to do about it? The long and the short of it is that one of our children, one of the youth in the group had Seema Samar's phone number, called her directly, complained, and the staff completely handled the garbage situation permanently. And as Yassine says, you know, one of the things that we consider our job with the children is to really show them how to hold their adults or hold their community to account for their rights.
Thank you. Very nice story. So, Zanna, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us about your project?
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank you all organizers and funders that gave me such a great opportunity to speak in front of you, to speak in front of greatest people in this world, in front of the people with common commitments and interests, and the people with great wishes and great opportunities, maybe great wishes, I think it's better word, great wishes to change the world for justice and to make this world much better than now. And I am Zanaa Jurmed. I am a human rights activist since 1990. And I have participated in the World Justice Forum 2011 in Spain. And this is my first time to speak in front of you in English. That is not my native language. And also that was learned when I was 40 only. And, but I feel myself much comfortable because I am among my friends and colleagues and with the people with common interests. And thank you, all of you, presenting here and listen to us. I am a human rights activist. I told you that I have been implemented the one project that was born, maybe incubated at the previous forum. Let me picture some situations in Mongolia. So I have been implementing the project to draft law on public common. Why? Because the Mongolian constitution says that public property and public common must be protected by state, and it must be owned by peoples of Mongolia. But this common property, public property, was owned by nobody, but was the protected nobody. And then state didn't fulfill its obligation under the constitution. So let me picture some pictures in the situations in Mongolia that because of these careless attitude from state, many of the land in rivers in the green area of Mongolia have been destroyed by mining operations. And then the herders and the nomads and the indigenous people has been forced to move from their places that have been lived in 100 years. And then also there were also some kind of fair armored conflicts between local people in the foreign companies. And also civil society groups and movements have been demonstrated in the cities, and it was very kind of hot situation in Mongolia. So I thought that we have to have the some kind of law on to protect the public common, and I came to the previous session forum with this idea. And one of the breakout session, I got some very helpful people to get idea and to help me and to assist the making very small proposal, brief proposal, and I have to name. I would like to name those people who were very helpful to me at the previous session. This is Christine Murray from France. This is Tim Hanstad from USA. This is Ed Turner from USA, and Steve Ross from the World Justice Forum, and Elena Agarkova from USA too, and some other people who've been very very helpful to me to create this small project. And that's in brief.
Okay, can you tell us something about the coalition that you built in Mongolia around your idea?
Mm-hmm. So it was born, incubated at the session, at the previous session forum, and then when I came back to home, and I just called and invited some civil society groups to talk on the law draft or something legal paper to be done with the civil society groups, with civil society movements that have been struggling in making demonstrations, and sometimes they were firing some kind of paper statues, like making them like pretending them that the member of parliament or some foreign investors. And then we've been talking about a lot of time. We devoted a lot of time to reach the consensus. And we talked to business people who mine the local areas, and we talked to also the government officials, including Prime Minister of Mongolia. So it took us more than half year to get the consensus, to reach the consensus. At the end of the day, we have a success to build up tripartite committee, consisted with civil society groups and business groups and the government officials. So previous Prime Minister was very helpful. Even he was, supporting by some small financial support. And then tripartite committee have been running two directions of activities. One is the consensus building. It was also have been running still. Another one is a true draft law. So we got draft law after 6 months, and then we translated this draft law. And we had also assistance from one of the member of parliament to draft this law, to initiate and to present it to government. For a while, the tripartite committee has been working on the action plans. Even we could have a training of trainers in support of USAID grant, and we prepared already 40 train of trainers how to escape from the mining issued conflicts. So this kind of thing been done so far.
Which were the most important challenges that you confronted with when implementing the project?
Yes, it's a very shocking for me, because I have devoted my time, my energy, my knowledge, and my everything into that project to be implemented. And then I stopped on that. We present the draft of law to the government. But it was the time very close to the election 2011. So June 2011 took election, and then the other party took the power in the parliament, and took the power in the cabinet too. So this new government dismantled all those ad hoc committees that have been set up in the during the previous government, which is maybe some kind of hostility to take over with each other, you know, and then because of these political and imbalances in Mongolia, all these great initiatives initiated by civil society groups have been going ruined, in broken down. Just this kind of challenges I have met in Mongolia, and also let me briefly introduce to you that what the situation in Mongolia right now. Situation in Mongolia right now is this. I can explain that semi or half open market, very dependent from the partisan politics. And in the social and cultural life, there is this some kind of trend of restoring of nationalism in the name of national pride, which is, it's very unbalanced and unsure situation. If you can do, for instance, some kind of criticize to be raised from the perspective of human rights and democratic values, you always be criticized back to you, and then people say that, oh, Ms. Zanna, you are always criticized Democratic Party. So in Mongolia, there is a much more confused and mixed understanding that the people think that the Democratic Party is democracy. And then these Democratic Party people do something in the Bolshevik manners, in Bolshevik way of doings. People just, you know, like it. My English is that.
Okay,
I'm sorry. I hope that you will help me to express myself more in relevant ways with the proper expressions.
Thank you, Zanna.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, Matthew, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization and your ideas. We know that Myanmar is opening up to the world. We've seen yesterday at the Rule of Law Index presentation that is increasing the score in the Rule of Law Index. So there are a lot of things going on in Myanmar. Some public transparency is increasing, and the conditions for civil society organizations works are improving. So let us tell us something about it.
Sure. Justice Base is a new organization. We were founded about a year and a half ago by Melissa Pack, who is currently a prosecutor at the Yugoslav Tribunal, just on the other side of the fountain out here. Our vision is to support local lawyers and civil society on implementing rule of law initiatives, and these are locally led rule of law initiatives. And we work specifically in transitional and post-conflict countries. Right now, the only country that we work in is Myanmar. Melissa hired me about a year ago to establish an office in Myanmar, and I'm the program office, the program manager in Yangon. We have a vision to be international, but as an organization with only one office right now, a big part of my job is to be developing a methodology and developing programming that can be sustainable in Myanmar, but also that can be replicated in other settings in the future. And to oversimplify a bit, we work broadly in 5 areas. One area is doing capacity building workshops and training for lawyers and for civil society. The capacity for these groups right now is very low because they've been cut off from international contact for a long time. And so we've done training on international law, on human rights documentation, on international humanitarian law, on federalism, on the lawmaking process, on fair trial standards, things like this. We also support legal aid organizations with a specific focus on organizations and programs to provide legal representation for groups that are facing violence or discrimination or vulnerable communities as well. We are supporting legal reform efforts in the country in two ways. One way is providing substantive input on particular agendas. So if there's a piece of legislation, we can help civil society to comment on it. The other way is providing input on the lawmaking process. So some training on what's the proper way to make laws, and especially on highlighting the need for consultation and transparency in that process. We're also conducting research on access to justice. There's been a number of very high-level rule of law assessments in Myanmar that have been pretty wonderful, but there's a lack of understanding about, at the grassroots level, at the community-based level, how do people get to the courts or get to police. And so we're doing some of the first research on those issues in Myanmar. And the final thing that we're doing is working on assessments of fair trial standards in courts. We're working with local lawyers that are in courtrooms to do these assessments. And it's some of the first information that's coming out from courts about what's happening. And we're also trying to improve lawyers' abilities to themselves assess what's happening in a courtroom. So I think over the last year we've been more successful on some of these projects and less successful on others, but we have been finding a place that is sort of an appropriate place for international lawyers and international experts to contribute to local needs and to local projects.
Mm-hmm. So you are one of the new Opportunity Fund grantees. So yes. Can you tell us something about the goals of the Opportunity Fund project?
Sure. So the Opportunity Fund project is funding this assessment of fair trial standards. This is really an opportunity for us to work with courtroom lawyers to build their skills and to develop their ability to know what's happening in the court and realize when there's irregularities or things that do not comply with their own law or with international standards. And it's been a really wonderful opportunity for us to see the development of lawyers. As I mentioned, the capacity is very low. We're doing a training for these lawyers, about 25 local lawyers who are in courtrooms, and we're trying to explain the concept of the presumption of innocence, which for myself as an American lawyer is sort of a fundamental thing that I would know before I went to law school. And after a half a day with these lawyers, most of them were still baffled by the concept just because it's not a reality to them. But over the course of the last month or so, this is a very new project, we've started to see these lawyers not only being able to accurately describe what's happening in their cases, but also to describe the implications of those things and areas in which the courtroom practice is falling short of the standards that we trained on. So that's a really encouraging thing for us to see that kind of progress in a short time.
Okay. So what are your expectations about the collaboration with the World Justice Project?
I mean, for us, this is very new. We haven't actually started spending World Justice Project's money yet. So we've been extremely thankful that funding from World Justice Project is going to let this new project continue. And what we're doing right now is we're considering this a pilot phase of the project because it's so new for Myanmar and for our organization and for the lawyers that we're working with. The big part of what we're doing is trying to understand how to do this project and what are the needs. And I think it will be great for us to be able to collaborate with World Justice Project, with colleagues that are in this room, about how do you do these projects if there's similar settings where things like this have been tried, how do you implement in those settings?
would you like to share with us a story about your project?
Yeah. I've mentioned that the World Justice Project is funding this assessment, which is being done by lawyers and largely focused on building their skills. One of our visions and sort of a central vision of Justice Base has been to support local lawyers to do a fully transparent trial monitoring project in Myanmar. But that's just not a reality right now. It wouldn't be approved by the government. We wouldn't have access to courts. It might get our partners in trouble. And so we're proceeding slowly. But one of the things we're trying to do is work with local partners to increase their understanding of the importance of transparency of courts. And so it's been a really wonderful process for us to be able to work with these local lawyers, but also work with activists and journalists to begin discussing these ideas and to see their understanding changing and to see them gaining confidence and exposure to some of these new ideas that they haven't had access to for a while.
Okay. Thank you, Matthew.
Yes.
Nemata, we met at every forum since the beginning, right? So why don't you tell us something about yourself and about your project?
Well, I am Nemata Majeks-Walker. I am a feminist gender activist from Sierra Leone, and I am the founder and first president of the 50-50 group of Sierra Leone. As the name of my group implies, our aim is to break gender barriers and ensure that there is equality between men and women. We aim to work side by side with our men. If I say to you our vision is a female president or female presidents in every country in the world, I hope you will agree with me. It is a very, very important vision, but it is also very hard to achieve it. It is extremely necessary, thank you very much. It is necessary. One of the reasons why we aim to have a female president is because my country was war-torn for 11 years. And we, the women of the country, led demonstrations to the rebel leader's house and demanded peace. And that was the beginning of the end of the war. But listen, as soon as the new government was reinstated, what happened to the women? They were relegated to the background. All the leadership positions were given to the men. So we decided that if the war was achieved through the sweat, tears, and hearts of us and our children, we women should not sit down. We have a right to participate in managing the peace that we have achieved for our country. So we decided to form this group which concentrates on training, organizing training for women, and empowering them to take part in politics and public life. And we also advocate for the legal rights of women. And since 2008 was it, when I went to the first World Justice Project, I think we were recommended by Madeleine Albright because we are the first group in West Africa to win the Madeleine Albright Award. When we went there, we were encouraged to incubate a project. And we were inspired to work on the 3 gender laws that had recently been passed. We and other civil society organizations had advocated for gender laws to be passed relating to inheritance, devolution of estates, domestic violence, and registration of customary marriages. I don't know whether you want me to go on, but I want to just tell you that it was very, very important for us to advocate and to try and implement these laws. Because as you all know, many times when laws are passed, they remain on the shelves. They are not implemented. And especially in my country, where the majority of those who suffer, for whom these laws were made, are women who are not very literate, are women who hardly know about what the laws are meant for. And also those especially in the hinterland, who are responsible for meting out justice to these women are also ignorant about the laws. How can they mete out justice if they don't know what these laws are? So we set out to simplify the laws. Our first problem was we simplified the laws in English. And as you all know, majority of those who can speak English are men, are the educated ones. And we have about 70% illiterate women that these laws should benefit. So we decided that after I think I made a presentation at the second Vienna Forum. After that, we decided that we should find a way of reaching the women themselves, the women for whom the laws were meant. So we decided to do oral translation of the laws. We recorded the laws. We did oral translations of the laws in 4 languages. We have about 19 languages in our country. We decided to translate the laws in the 4 major languages and circulate and disseminate the information through the media, especially through radio, because not many people have televisions. So we did that. And we found out that even when we did that, it did not reach as many women as we wanted. So we decided that we will organize listening sessions. We bought tape recorders and we organized listening sessions in the chief's court barracks, and 30 women and the chief will sit down at some point and listen to the recording of the laws in their own languages. Should I stop?
Very interesting. What was your experience managing the Opportunity Grant Fund grants?
Well, it was a very exciting experience. We found out that at every point we had to do interim reports. But one of the things that helped us was that we carried out planning. We planned at the beginning. We had multidisciplinary meetings. We had so many disciplines who were involved. Our work involved translators. So we had to get translators of the different languages, and we had meetings. And even when the laws were translated, we had to pre-test the translation with a group of women. And during those translation sessions, we found out that some of the translations were not very good because of the different dialects that were spoken within the different languages. So we had to redo the translations, validate them before we actually got people to translate them. And one of the challenges we experienced was that we had wanted the chiefs to air the translations out. But it was very difficult for them to do it because they couldn't speak the language in a very standard form. So we had to, because we got translators from the university and from the Sierra Leone Bible Society. So in the end, we had to ask the translators themselves to air the messages on the CDs.
Would you like to tell a story about your project?
Well, I can tell you 2 success stories, which excites me. And I think one of the World Justice Project's observers went to Sierra Leone to observe the project. There was a time when a lady who had been married to Ramatu, she had been married to her husband for about 18 years. She was accused of being a witch, and when her husband died, they accused her of being a witch and they accused her of killing her husband. And they kicked her out of the house, and her husband's family say, in our culture, the property of your husband returns to her family, so you don't belong to this house. So Ramatu became homeless. She didn't have access to her children. Her children belonged to the husband's family. And Ramatu was lost. She didn't know what to do. Luckily for her, somebody who had listened to one of the translations, one of the recordings of the gender laws, told her that she could go to the family support unit in the police station and get support. So she went there, and we got a lawyer who has helped her. And now she has survived it. She was able to recover her house, and she's back with her family, which is a very good story. Another one is one lady who was married to her husband. The husband beat her so much that she ran to her parents' home. When she went to her parents' home, all the parents said is, we are not here to home, you go back to your husband's house. Can you believe that? And they refused to accept her in her husband's house, in her parents' house when she returned to her family. So they asked her to return to her husband's house. So luckily for her, she came across some friends who also told her about the law, that there is now a domestic violence law that will put your husband in trouble. And her parents said, if you don't report him. He's your husband. You know, I mean, they see it as such a sacred thing. You have to cover your husband. You have to stand by him. You have to support him. And luckily, this lady supported her to the extent that she took her to a lawyer, and the lawyer helped her, and she was able to escape the abusive marriage. There are so many more stories I can tell you, but I think I should stop there for now.
Okay, thank you. So, Ruha, please introduce yourself and a project you're working on.
Sure. My name is Ruha Devanesan. I work with the Internet Bar Organization, whose mission is to improve access to justice through technology. And PeaceTones is one of our initiatives. It was funded by the Opportunity Fund in 2008, so we got seed funding to start PeaceTones. And it was an idea that Jeff Aresti, our president, had. And in its infancy, it was about using music as a way to promote access to justice through micro-funding musicians. So finding musicians in post-conflict and post-disaster communities who had a positive message to their music, who were able to voice the grievances of their communities, inspire action, bridge social, economic, and political differences by reminding listeners about their common humanity, but also highlighting difference as a richness of culture rather than a basis for discrimination and conflict. The idea was if you could work with these musicians, help them get their music out to their communities, but also their nation and a global audience, we would be able to help their communities heal through conflict and through disaster, but also bring a message and a story to an international audience that wasn't just about victimization, but also told the perspective of local people from their own view, and gave a richer description of what was going on the ground. So with the Opportunity Fund, we were able to run 3 projects, one in Recife in Brazil, one in Sierra Leone in Freetown, and one in Balan, which is a small village in the north of Haiti. And since then, we've run another project in Port-au-Prince, worked with 20 musicians in Port-au-Prince, one of whom went on to become one of the biggest artists in Haiti, one of the biggest celebrities in Haiti. So we've had a lot of great success. Just to go through the stages of what we do, we identify artists in these communities and we run legal workshops with them. So legal rights workshops on contract law, intellectual property law, the kinds of issues you're going to come across as an artist starting out in your career. But we also collaborate with partners on the ground to run marketing workshops and social media workshops, because in many ways, Facebook is a new kind of soapbox, and YouTube is a new kind of public radio, especially in some of these countries where we're working, where people are going to internet cafes. They may not have a computer at home, but they're going to internet cafes, and this is how they get their news. This is how they listen to music. If they don't have a television or a radio at home, they go to a cafe and consume in this way. So to educate our artists on reaching out to their own audiences, but also to global audiences in this way is a huge part of what we do. We also record an album with these artists, or we take an album that they've recorded and we distribute it for them online. And the idea behind that is we're basically giving them a kickstart to their career. We send back 90% of the profits to the artists, and we ask them to dedicate a portion of their album income to a community development project that they feel passionately about, or that inspired their music in the first place. So some of the projects that our artists have supported are a recording studio in the favela that the kids in Brazil came from, a community recording studio so that they could go in and record, but also anyone else in the community who had music that they wanted to record could go. The artists in Haiti, in the north of Haiti, chose to fund a maternity clinic in Balan because there were no facilities for birthing, and giving birth was a very dangerous thing in that particular community. the artists we work with in Freetown said what we really need is to be able to educate children on how to use computers, so they want to set up a computer school. They've established a fund to collect money not only from this album, but also do separate fundraising activities, do concerts around the US and also in Freetown to raise money for this computer school. And our latest artist, Juanito, has decided to fund literacy programs in Port-au-Prince because he says the way he's able to write his lyrics and express himself is because he was fortunate enough to go to school in Port-au-Prince, to come from a village in northern Haiti, go to school in Port-au-Prince, live with a family that took him in. And he says that's important for other children to have access to as well. Mm-hmm. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, how was your idea of using the internet for the promotion of artists incubated?
It started again with the Opportunity Fund. The idea started out actually as using ringtones, selling ringtones, but we started with that and decided really we should expand to selling digital music because music as an art form as opposed to visual art, for example, or theater is something that you can digitize and transport to the opposite side of the world for almost free. So we put the music online also with the help of the Opportunity Fund funding. All of our artists' albums are on iTunes and Amazon.com, and we use a new platform called Bandcamp. A lot of what we do is also research the newest music platforms that are available to artists and also to consumers in different countries. So, for example, when iTunes was not available in much of the developing world, there were other platforms that were available. Bandcamp is accessible throughout the world. There are many African artists, African independent artists who are putting their music up on there. So these are tools that we learn about and then translate through our educational programs to our artists.
Mm-hmm. So which were the main challenges that you encounter during the implementation of your project?
One of the biggest challenges when working in communities where the rule of law is very broken down is, and we're running workshops on legal rights. The workshops we run are very interactive, and we encourage discussion and debate. And one issue that comes up everywhere we go is artists say, well, okay, you're teaching us about copyright. If I register my music with the Copyright Office, I know that as soon as I publish my music, tomorrow morning someone's going to be selling my album on the street, a pirated version of my album. What's the point? Am I going to take him to court? I don't have the funds to take him to court, so what's the point? So there is this challenge of dealing with the existing system on the ground and the existing status on the ground, and convincing people that if you establish a pattern of behavior amongst yourselves as a society, that pattern travels upwards to the government. A system of accountability to one another travels upwards, and this is how we phrase it. So we talk about formal laws and formal obligations, but also informal responsibility between community members. So we teach artists about the value of their music. We teach communities about the value of the artist's music. So you're not necessarily buying someone's album because you have to. You're buying it because you want to compensate them for an art that they've given you that you benefit from.
Okay, thank you. So we are almost on time. Do we have some time for questions and answers?
I would like to organize Q&A, but I'm afraid we're going to need to do that during the break, if that's all right.
Okay.
Well, please join me in thanking this panel for a wonderful presentation. These are great examples of how each of us, really each of us, can develop rule of law initiatives that will strengthen the rule of law and that we can take to our communities back home. Refreshments are now available as we start to move to our Justice Incubator working sessions, which start promptly at 11 o'clock in the same rooms that we were in yesterday. If you get a chance during the day today, this evening, please talk to our panelists here today about their specific programs and the experience they've had in developing them from an idea to real implementation. We will then have lunch, move on to lunch after the incubator working sessions. Lunch will be at 12:30 in the Atlantic room downstairs here. At 12:30, please be in the rooms for our concurrent topical panels listed in your agenda. You can select the one that appeals to you most, and then to be back here in this room, in the auditorium, at 4:30 for our session with Justice Ginsburg, Justice Northfleet from Brazil, and Shirin Ebadi, Nobel Peace Prize winner, to talk about women's issues. So let us break now. Thank you very much for your attention and your participation this morning.
1 second, if I may. They will stay, the panel will stay in front for people who ask questions. Please move forward as we move the rest of us out to the next session. Thank you.
Sorry, that's right.